Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. In the most recent episode of The Bad Batch, spoiler alert, we follow Omega and Crosshair after their daring escape from Mount Tantus with their new hound buddy, Batcher. In a lot of ways, Omega and Crosshair are the least alike from a personality standpoint when you look at the Bad Batch crew, but at the same time, I really can't imagine anyone else but Omega helping Crosshair escape from the Empire. These two have a very unique relationship.
Never liked it on Camino, did you?
Go away.
Crosshair, designated CT-9904, seems like a pretty straightforward individual to understand. He's a modified clone like the rest of the 99 crew. His specialty is marksmanship. He has great eyesight and reflexes and excels at long-range combat. As the sniper for the group, he had an exceptionally dangerous job that required a great deal of discipline and focus. Oftentimes, snipers are deployed in fights either alone or with an observer and a small fire team. They're often outgunned and outnumbered, and so a great deal of preparation must be done to ensure a successful and safe mission. This involves doing a lot of research on the location you're deploying to, stalking and observing your target for a long period of time before making your move. It's no wonder Crosshair is such a serious and sullen individual. He has no time for any jokes or leisure, and that's because as a sniper, once the shot is taken, Crosshair is generally exposed and all hell usually breaks loose and the hunt is on. While doing his job, the smallest of mistakes can lead to a failure of the mission. In order to stay alive, Crosshair has to be in control of many factors as possible in his surroundings. This means working on controlling his emotions so that they don't affect his judgment, and it also means eliminating individuals who might be incompetent around him and pose a danger to his mission. This is probably why Crosshair is ultimately a loner type, and he seems to really dislike regular clones, far more than the rest of the Bad Batch. He most likely does not perceive the regular clones to be up to his standard. The fact that he works with Clone Force 99 at all should tell you just how skilled this unit is. Now, because of how he comes off to everyone, a lot of people, including Crosshair's own brothers, viewed this quiet clone as a heartless and cruel individual, especially when he decides to stay on with the Empire instead of join his brothers in exile. But be careful with judging someone like Crosshair. I mean, as a rule, never judge another individual who's in a line of work that you've never worked in, especially when it comes to combat. Very few of us know the exhilaration of watching an enemy camp come to life below you as you let off a precision shot, and very few of us know what it takes to survive the ensuing chaos that usually happens afterwards. But Crosshair does, and that is most likely why he is the way he is. I would argue that out of all the clones of the Bad Batch, Crosshair took his job the most seriously, which also seems to indicate that Crosshair feared failure the most out of this group. I mean, Wrecker was always having fun in the middle of the battle, bashing people's heads together.
Time to release the wrecking ball! Yeah!
Hunter usually didn't think much during battles. He seemed to always rely on his instincts.
What are you doing? Going for a ride.
And Tech, as usual, was just running around absorbing information and background lore.
That's why all those Yabik males tried to eat us.
Technically, they were trying to mate with us. And for your information, the stinger of a Yalbek queen is a delicacy on some planets.
I guess you could say the Bad Batch had a very unique way of fighting battles, and Crosshair has always been the most orthodox, straight kind of member when it comes to his tactics and his approach. So I guess I'm not surprised that when he leaves, a lot of the other clones don't understand why. Wrecker has the biggest problem with Crosshair leaving. Wrecker is an emotional individual, and he sees Crosshair's departure as a betrayal. Hunter, who is the group's leader, is saddened by the departure of Crosshair as well, but at the same time, his belief that every individual should be allowed to follow their own path allows him to make peace somewhat with Crosshair's actions. And Tech, while he might not understand exactly what makes Crosshair want to leave, he respects his brother's wishes.
I have to respect their decision. Even though it can be difficult to understand, we must carry on.
He knows what it's like to be different and not fit in, so he gives Crosshair the benefit of the doubt. But even then, none of the clone brothers truly understand why Crosshair leave. Surprisingly, it's Omega, the individual who knows him for the shortest period of time, that really understands him. Well, actually, Omega technically does kind of grow Crosshair and his brothers in the lab with Nala Se, but I don't know if that really counts. Omega is a very special individual. She is unmodified like Boba Fett, but she's also one of the few female Fett clones. Tech noticed quite soon after meeting Omega that she also had a heightened state of awareness. She just naturally understood how people thought and what they were going through, and was able to use that information to her benefit. It was that skill that allowed her to talk her way onto the Bad Batch team in the first place. She clearly left a strong impression on the group, which is ultimately what made Hunter decide that they needed to go back to Tipico City and rescue her.
You want to sit with us? That's never happened before.
Wow.
I like you. You don't fit in around here either.
You see, Omega is a very special clone with special skills. She has heightened tactical abilities, but she also has a great sense of empathy for all beings around her. Hunter might be able to detect electromagnetic signals from hundreds of miles away, but Omega is the only member of the Bad Batch that can quickly look at a person and understand what motivates them, what their fears and concerns are, and so on. When the Bad Batch arrived to Sid's bar on Ord Mantell looking for a fixer, none of them can identify where Sid is. Omega, however, finds her immediately.
What's your deal, Tiny?
You're Sid.
You're sharper than your friends over there.
When Omega is captured by the bounty hunter Cad Bane, she manages to trick his personal robot Toto 360 into releasing her.
My, yes, that's working. It feels brand new.
Sorry.
Whether Omega is being manipulative or not in these situations doesn't matter. We'll probably talk about that in another video. What does matter is that Omega simply has more information and clarity over an individual's actions than most people. And so when Crosshair decides to stay with the Empire, she's the least surprised.
I know what you're going to do, but please don't.
What do you know?
I know it's not your fault. You can't help it.
Now, Omega sees right through Crosshair's tough and focused demeanor. She understands that Crosshair needs the structure that the Empire provides more than the rest of the crew. He is also a true believer in peace and stability that the Empire can bring. He's also far more realistic than the rest of the Bad Batch crew. He realizes that they don't have much of a chance surviving running away from the Empire, which is why he's more than willing to bow down to their new leaders. It takes Hunter until the end of the first season to understand that this is just who Crosshair is. Up until this point, he believed that it was the inhibitor chip that was keeping Crosshair like this.
I had my chip removed a long time ago.
You know, guys like Crosshair are not used to being understood, so they don't even try to explain themselves often. Instead, individuals like Crosshair tend to speak through their actions. You know, Crosshair made it clear to the Bad Batch that he still cared about them and wanted them to be a part of his family when he killed his own elite troopers during that showdown on Tipico City. Now, Crosshair, despite being a loner and quite self-resilient, did care a lot about his brothers. He just wasn't able to properly communicate it. Which is where Omega steps into the equation so well. When Crosshair gave the rest of the Bad Batch no reason to help him, Omega was the individual that reminded both sides that they all once used to be a family. And although nothing can really convince Crosshair to leave the Empire in the first season, he does save Omega from drowning in the last episode. This was never meant to be a sliver of hope that Crosshair might betray the Empire. Instead, it shows us that Omega has reached Crosshair, and that she is the glue that now holds what remains of this unit together. She alone can remind these clones that ideology and politics don't really matter that much when you put them up against family. In this way, Omega is not all that different from Vin Diesel. She flies around the galaxy, living life at a quarter parsec a time, pushing those very important family values. And so had she not come along when she did, the departure of Crosshair could have permanently destroyed this small family. There's also something very refreshing about Omega's view of the world. She'd been trapped on Tipico City in a lab for most of her life, and now, during her adventures off-world to other planets, she never takes a moment for granted. Now, because of her sheltered upbringing, you could say that she's quite naive in how she saw the world. But this viewpoint does come in handy, especially when she's amongst these clone troopers who have a very harsh view of reality. They kind of balance each other out quite well. The Bad Batch generally are very realistic on how they approach situations. They're dealing with life or death situations on a daily basis. They think about the objective and how to approach it, and not much else. Things like the ethics and morality of a mission are something that higher-ranking officers and politicians dealt with. But now that the clones are no longer employed by the Republic or the Empire, they kind of have to vet the missions they go on themselves. They have to make sure that the jobs they took, the people they helped, also aligned with their own values. But what are those values? Well, oftentimes, who the clones trust is decided, believe it or not, by this little kid, Omega. And she's really the classic example of a person with no enemies. She even befriends individuals like Sid, who ultimately is unworthy of the Bad Batch's trust. I'm sure we haven't heard the last of her yet because Omega just has a way of winning almost everyone over to her side. Now, a lot of fans might consider a character like Omega unrealistic, childish, and ultimately foolish because of her bright-eyed view of the galaxy. But there's a reason why all these clones, including Crosshair, ultimately end up looking up to her. It's the same reason why I look up to her. There's a purity and innocence to the way she sees the galaxy. It's not a front or an act. She truly believes she can befriend and reach almost every person, creature, and robot in the galaxy. But what makes her different is she's not a fool. When she needs to take up arms to protect herself or her family, she does it. Like when she shoots Crosshair's blaster out of his hands. Omega is ultimately a force of nature, a force for goodness, something that the clones don't understand completely. But they know enough about her to understand that she is worth protecting. And this gives the clones a new purpose to continue fighting and surviving.
Don't risk anything for me.
And having a purpose is incredibly important for all soldiers. As a matter of fact, without Omega, I'm pretty sure the Bad Batch would not have survived as long as it did. They could have just gone and taken jobs as mercenaries and become just another group of bounty hunters, or fought against the Empire for revenge. But without a compass guiding them, the Bad Batch could have turned into another partisans. That's Saw Gerrera's outfit, who were very chaotic and didn't have any purpose at all, other than to kill Imperials. The lesson we can learn from Crosshair and Omega's relationship is that oftentimes we can learn the most from individuals who are the least like us. We can gain the most strength from individuals who are strong in areas where we are weak. When Omega and Crosshair try to sneak off-world in the most recent episode, it's Omega's empathy that makes her realize that she can potentially bribe the customs official at the check-in counter for the spaceport. She would go on to use her strategic abilities to hustle people out of their credits in an assortment of games at a cantina. But when that plan ultimately fails, it's up to Crosshair to blast his way through. These two make a truly awesome team together. To truly understand what people think and motivates them is a very important skill to have. The Bad Batch were really lucky to have found Omega when they did, because not only does she truly understand all of the clones, even better than they understood themselves, she also happened to be a good person and used her powers of empathy to help people instead of taking advantage of them. Omega might be small, she might sometimes make poor judgments, but she's definitely the heart of the Bad Batch, and in a lot of ways, she's also the leader, a lot more than Hunter could ever be. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.